And here we are. We are live. Hello, happy Wednesday, everyone. Go live, go live. Let me remove this one. Again, LinkedIn is not letting me link in. All right.
Well, so I just got your live little message popped up. So
you did?
Yeah, it's the counter's up there and it's showing live, but I don't know if that's LinkedIn or if that's
So right now we're on Facebook and we're on YouTube, but LinkedIn, we're not quite there yet. Hopefully next week. Okay. But hi guys, welcome. I want to introduce you to one of my best friends. Her name is Susi Kaplan. She has been, I'm sorry. She's been such a light for me in my darkest time. Girl, you are a sister to me. You are a soul sister. You supported me at a time when I felt like I had no support. You came to me at a time when I felt so alone in what I was going through. You said yes to me when so many people were saying no. And I just want you to know that I always lean back in those times, on those times, to keep me moving forward. And I wouldn't be where I am today without your love, your sisterhood, your tribal support. And I'm just so happy that we have amazing things to share. And it's been a fight, it's been a struggle, but it's been definitely worth it. And you are such a leader in all you are. And I'm just so grateful for you, Susi. So thank you for making the time today. I know you have to run. We have a hard stop at what time for you?
12:15. So I there's a little bit of latitude there because I know.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Awesome. So we can just roll with it and just be. Okay. So Susi and I, how did we meet, Susi?
How did we meet, actually?
No, right? On the yard somehow.
Borough moms. Like our kids all went to school together. So probably on the playground, I would venture at the first meeting. And then maybe at one of the mom parties, mom events. I don't know. There's been a multitude of PTA events, happy hours, you name it, that we probably come across each other at.
I know, and I can't even pinpoint exactly when.
I think the first time I ever really talked to you, though, was at Christine Abramowski's
white party.
That was one of the first times I ever talked to you. And I remember I thought you were hysterical because you were telling us the story about how when she invited you to the white party, you were like, but we're not white. And I just thought that was hysterical. I was like, oh my God, that's so funny. Like, Christine's thinking we're white and you're thinking like.
It was a joke, but I thought it was really funny.
I thought it was hysterical. I was like, all right, this girl is right. Because there was just enough of that like sarcastic edge to it where I was like, this girl is right in my wheelhouse, like in terms of sense of humor and all that stuff. So that was one of the first conversations I think we ever had.
That is so funny. I forgot all about that. But that sounds so me to say. It doesn't surprise me at all. But yeah, I remember just connecting to you because we were just, I felt like we were just so real. You know, we keep it real. There's like no guesswork when it comes to us. I think those are the best relationships, you know, when you just feel each other's heart, you know, the intentions are good and you can kind of say whatever you want to say and not be judged for it. Right. And I just want you to know I value you. And wow, we were going through some serious things when we first met though, huh?
Yes. Craziness. Yes.
I mean, here I was thinking I lost my dad. Weeks later, find out about infidelity, right? Gave up a career that I loved. I'm like 2 years deep into being a full-time mom thinking, oh my gosh, what did I do? What was I thinking? I'm such a fool. And then I, like in my moment of feeling like in complete despair and alone, I meet this wonderful, amazing mom who's a go-getter, who's like, production executive director, you know, of this huge company that's like a huge client for Sony. And like, I meet you and you're such a go-getter and you like have such a big, warm heart and you're so intelligent. Like I always learn and grow with you. That's why I love our time together. Like we just feed off of each other's energy. You know, it's like free therapy.
Yeah. Totally. Well, in that, like, I remember talking to you at like one of the happy hours or something, and I think that's when I first found out what was going on with you, right, and stuff. And I first I was like honored that you trusted me enough to even share like what was going on, because that's super personal. But I think I was completely blown away by how similar our stories were, right? Like it kind of threw me for a loop, because you go through this whole experience. Like, first of all, here you were, right? You're like, you had focused on the kids and your marriage and everything else, and then the rug just gets yanked right out from under you, and you're like totally off balance. And you have a tendency to feel like you're the only one going through that, right? Like, and I speak from experience with that. Like, the rug got yanked out from under me, and I was like, holy shit, everything I thought my life was going to look like is now up.
You planned for, right?
Yeah, like upside down, right? And you're just like, you know, and we have a tendency to isolate when that happens, right? Women are really good at like sucking it all inside and being like super, this is my thing to deal with. And you put this brave face out in the world, and you don't realize that there are other people out there having the same experience, feeling the same emotions, going through all of the same sort of upheaval. And so the fact that you were open about that was huge, too, because like so many people aren't. And then it was like, wow, this is really kind of a similar story, and I'm not so unique. And
yes, you are.
There's like this, you know, but that shared experience makes you feel less weak.
Yeah, like you're in it together, right? Yeah. You're stronger together.
So you can talk about all of the struggles that you have. Like, and I mean, we have the parallels of, we have 3 kids. We, you know, there's all this stuff kind of that ties us together in so many ways. We have like the older kids, and then the, you know, like, and then the little, so it's an interesting and sort of important thing that has us all sort of tied together, you and me especially. But there are so many people out there that maybe don't know that that's the case. So, I mean, one of the benefits for me, I went to a women's retreat in 2016 that really opened my eyes to like, my story isn't all that different from a lot of other people. And that was huge for me, because I think I always had this tendency to be the, like, I got to be the strong one. I got to be the brave one. I got to have it all together all the time. It's this whole, I got to be enough thing. So I went to this retreat, I can't really speak to, I mean, I was already in this space of, I was going through the divorce. This was prior to the divorce being final, and all that. And I was kind of looking for, what is the next thing going to look like? Who am I? Like, if I'm not a wife and I'm not, you know, who am I? So I went to this retreat, and it completely changed my perspective on the women in my life and who I surround myself with. Yeah. And that was a huge gift for me. Because there are a lot of things I learned in the space of the retreat, but the biggest sort of gift that came out of that was a tribe of women that is unbelievably unmatched in terms of building me up and supporting me and stuff. And you're one of those. So it, you know, I think, and we provide that for each other, right? That's like sort of a huge factor. But it was the biggest lesson I learned was who you surround yourself with is extremely important. It's probably the most important thing.
Yeah, it's like life or death even, right? I mean, if we could be really frank about it, that's how I felt. I was like, I don't think I could have gotten through this alone, like I said, and I mean that wholeheartedly, you know? Like when I just started my career, right, working with World Financial Group, Transamerica, like my parents were clients, there was a lot of trust in the business already. I had no doubt that this was the company for me.
Right.
But my story is different than many other people that got recruited in the business. It comes off as a pyramid scheme or whatever, you know, and it's not. And I'll explain why next time. I'll get into the nitty gritty of that. But for the purpose of this, you know, I dealt with a lot of like, even, you know, some of my really, I thought, good friends, you know. I invited them to events, and then you know, there was one in particular that told all my other girlfriends not to go because Nguyen's just going to try to recruit you. And it was just so like just heartbreaking.
Right.
Like, you know me and you did that, right? You know me and you did that. Like, you sabotaged my business before I even had a chance to launch it, you know? And you like, but again, I came out and I'm all about like dealing directly and like having open communication. And I asked her like, you know what, why, what happened? Why would you do this? She said, because like, you know, I had this bad experience with this WFG agent who's like constantly trying to recruit me. And I was like, am I anything like him? No, you're not. Okay. And you know me, right? Or so I thought you did. Yeah. Then why did you not at least allow me to share my honest story, something that could literally change and save my friends and their families' lives, right? And I just want to thank you because that was what I was going through. You know, that was what I was going through. And at the same time, I reached out to you because I was like, you know, going through the training process. And as a mentee, I needed my mentor there, right? And I reached out to you and I said, hey, can you help me out with my training? And I knew it came off weird, but I knew what I had was amazing. You know, I knew what I had gave me financial peace of mind, especially as a mom and a woman, that I like, oh my gosh, if I could just share this, right? Share this, and whoever wants it, awesome. Whoever doesn't, that's okay. No pressure ever. I'm not trying to chase anybody to get something that's great for them and their families. That's for them to decide, right? And you said, absolutely, whatever. I remember that phone call. I was so nervous on the other line. I was like, I don't want her to think I'm weird. Because I'm not. I'm weird in ways that she knows and accepts. I don't want her thinking I'm weird like one of those guys, you know?
I can tell you was shaking. I remember thinking, wow. But you had already told me that you had a hard time with like the cold calling and stuff like that. So I was like, wow, she's like, I know her and she's really nervous. Like this is, you were
it's so weird because it was just so unnatural for me to do something like that. You know, like here I am knowing that this is awesome, but at the same time, like I don't want her to think I'm weird in that way because I hate that feeling. And I'm so cognizant of how people feel on the other side. But even then, I was weird and you still said yes to me.
So I have a question for you, friend. Do you think part of your fear, though, was the rejection that you had experienced before and you were still kind of tied up in all of that because people that you thought were going to be in your corner surprised you by not being in your corner? And so you had this expectation, I think, going in with me, especially because we didn't know each other that well yet, that I was going to be another one of those, yeah, no, like what are you talking about? You know?
Yeah. And you know, and I contribute to that myself too. You know, I think back and I think about how I've made it my own more than ever, right? If you came to me maybe 4 months ago, my you know, my presentation wouldn't even be the same, right? I've evolved so much in the process that yeah, I've actually learned from those horrible phone calls that I made, you know? Like it was also me. Like it was like my human error or my human experience of, oh my gosh, like overthinking. That's just what we do. And like underdoing or overdoing, whatever that means, right? And so I like to say, like, I take ownership in the fact that I wasn't who I needed to be to have a more natural conversation with someone about it, you know, because I was working on myself. But yeah, you're right. Rejection definitely led to me expecting rejection so much that it shut me down before I even opened my mouth. And then the rejection of really like, you know, my husband, right? Like feeling like so rejected in that process too. And you know, when I found out, I questioned everything. Like, oh my gosh, am I pretty enough? Am I not fun enough? Am I not smart enough? Is that why? It must be why. It must be why, right? And so I just want to thank you again for being so just supportive and saying yes. Because you know, I told you, I'm like, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just want to show you what I'm doing. And then maybe you could send me referrals.
Yeah.
Right. And then Johanna and I came out and I remember your cats and dogs were on our laps and heads and shoulders.
Yeah, she jumped on the table, right? When we were trying to go through the I totally forgot about that. Oh my god.
So funny. It was so cute. Sat on our lap even.
Yeah, you're trying to do your like presentation and the cat's like walks right through the middle.
But it was so cool because it was like you know, you allowed me a space to practice, you know, allowed me a space to grow. And then you were like, oh my gosh, you actually said yes to wanting a plan. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And then, you know, we got you a plan, got you all started. And then what happens? A year and a half later.
Yeah, interesting because the timing was such that like I was looking for some kind of a savings vehicle, right? And I was trying to figure out like what my next step is. And you called me and were like, hey, I'm going through this training and I need to do this thing. And something clicked for me. And part of it is we go to great lengths to prove ourselves right about how wrong we are. You know what I mean? Like, so you were in this space of like, you know, rejection and all this, and you're dealing with all this sort of emotional upheaval. And you called me and it was so, and you had already talked to me a little bit about the rejection piece of it, but you were so nervous and it was so clear. And yet at the back end of this, and you didn't even know this, I was already looking for, like, I need something that's gonna, you know, because with everything that's going on, just the idea of like saving isn't high on my list of priorities. So I need something that's gonna make me do that.
Yeah.
In a really sort of kind of like doesn't require a lot of thought from me sort of way, right? And then here you come with this thing. So it's like timing being what it is, right? Like that. And I don't know that I ever told you that, but that, like, you know, right? That's a huge part of why I said yes, right? Because I was already in that space. You just didn't know that. So, you know, and that, and then just honestly, like what's a few minutes of my time, right? For someone that I value. So that's kind of how I look at it. So it turned out to be a really good move on my part, especially because, you know, like health-wise at the time, I was in really good shape. So I was running half marathons and stuff. So like when you do the whole life insurance piece and they do the whole health, even at my age, because I think I was 50 at the time?
Yeah, 50.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, at my age, you're always a little bit worried, like, oh, wow, what are they gonna, you know, what are they gonna find and stuff? And like, I was like, at the top of the top in terms of health at that point in time. So it was great timing.
Yeah, preferred elite, like literally cream of the crop when it comes to like peak health state. Yeah. It was exciting. It was so exciting. We celebrated that.
Yeah. That was awesome. And I mean, I knew I was in good shape because I knew like I was like running the races and doing all this stuff. So I knew that, but you always wonder, especially when you have family history, and stuff, and look, genetically speaking, like the genetics, it's not in my favor. And you know, the fact that this last year I've been dealing with breast cancer, it makes the timing of what we did even more sort of spectacular, right? Because it's like, here we are 3 years later, and I'm like, you know, dealing with this massive health upheaval that I really, now look, my mom's had breast cancer 3 times. My cousin had breast cancer. My aunt died of breast cancer. So it was never a question of if, it was always kind of a question of when. But I really thought I was going to be the outlier. I really did. Because I had done everything right. Like I didn't smoke and I didn't take like massive hormones. And I was super sort of, because I had the family history I had. So I was like, I'm going to be the outlier. I'm not going to deal with this.
Yeah. I'm going to be proactive. I'm going to take it, like, take control of my health, be active.
Yeah.
Make decisions.
I believed that, you know, by doing all that stuff, by exercising, by eating right, by focusing on like the right sort of medical care, and then by doing all of the stuff that you're supposed to do as a woman for your healthcare, right?
Yes.
I thought, you know, I've got this, like, even if I do end up with cancer, we're going to catch it so early that it's going to like not be an issue. Right. Well, life has a way. Life is a way of throwing you curveballs that you don't expect. And that was what I was dealing with at the time. I had gone in for my mammogram in May, right? Regular mammogram.
What year was this, Susie? Do you remember?
This was May of 2019. This was last. So I got in, and I've been doing this like every year regularly since I was 30, right? Because my mom has had cancer. So, so I went in for my mammogram. My mammogram in May was clear. I had my checkup with my doctor in April. I had a full female exam, like the top to bottom, right? Breast exam, the whole 9 yards, right? Clean bill of health. So then at the end of June, I'm in the shower and I'm doing like, I do a monthly breast exam at the end of every month. It's just part of, you know, when you have breast cancer in your family, you do that. So I'm in the shower, and I'm like, holy shit, what is that? that should not be there.
Mm-hmm.
So I call my doctor, I get in to see him. He's like, I have no idea. That was not there in April when I examined you. At least I don't think so. And if it was, we missed it. So I'm like, holy crap. So they send me in for an ultrasound. I'm thinking in my head, this has to be a fibroid. It has to be a cyst. It has to be something benign because it just showed up too fast. Like I just had all, like it just can't be cancer. It just can't. It's one, it's too big. And two, it's like it just showed up too fast. So I go in for the ultrasound and they're like, wow, yeah, this is like 30 millimeters. This is a pretty good size, but it's inconclusive what this is. We need to biopsy. So then I have to go back and do the biopsy. So then I do that. I fly off to my friend's wedding. I'm having a great time. I get the call. They're like, hey, we want you to come in for your results. I'm like, sure, no problem. I schedule it. I don't think anything of it, right? I'm like, so I get back from the wedding. I go in like that Monday and I walked in by myself because I was so convinced that this was nothing, right? I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell anybody. And I walked in by myself and they give me the results and they're like, yeah, so it's cancer. And I'm like, wait, what? Like I was so unprepared for what I was dealing with. And they're like, yeah, it's, and it's like invasive lobular, So then the oncologist looks at me and she's like, and you're going to laugh when you hear this. She's like, well, if you have to have cancer, this is the best kind to have. And I looked at her and I'm like, that is the biggest oxymoron I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Like,
oh my gosh.
I know it sounds ridiculous, but she's like, you have the most treatable cancer. Like, it is 100% hormone receptive. Like, it is it's HER2 negative, which is good. It's invasive, but it doesn't look like it's, at least based on the test results we have so far. So then they send me for a CT scan. They send me for an MRI. They sent me for a bone scan. I had a full CT.
Gosh.
Because they're looking for metastasis, right? So, so the concern is, so they do the CT, nothing shows up in the CT, which is great. The bone scan is clear. The brain scan is clear. So I'm like, all right, good. We're dealing with something that's just localized in the breast, but you still don't know until you do the surgery, right? So I start interviewing doctors and I'm trying to figure out, like, what the hell am I going to do? There's so much information you don't have until they take the tumor out. And they're asking you to make all these decisions about, your treatment and everything else. And you don't know what you're dealing with. It is so hard. So I'm interviewing doctors and I'm trying to figure out, like, what is my course of action going to be? And then looking at the family history, it's like, do I bite the bullet and do like bilateral mastectomy and just take it all out so I'm not dealing with this again? Like, what do I do? Mm-hmm. So I finally found a doctor. And this is my biggest recommendation for women out there.
Awesome.
If you're going through anything health related and you do not feel comfortable with your doctor, don't settle for that. Don't. Find someone that you can have honest conversations with and be real with about what you're afraid of, real with about your questions. And it doesn't matter what it is, but especially if it's something like this, you have to have a team of doctors that you feel like have your best interests at heart. Don't settle for feeling like a case study. Absolutely not. 100% don't. Feel like a person, and they should treat the whole person, because cancer isn't just a physical battle. It's an emotional battle too. Mental, emotional. I mean, there's a lot of stress around this and stuff. And there's so many unknowns in the beginning when you first get diagnosed. It's terrifying. And every test you go for, you're on pins and needles till you get the results and waiting to find out like what, and I got lucky. The MRI showed that I had a 5-centimeter tumor in my breast.
That's crazy. From nothing to 5 centimeters in like a month span. From the time you did your mammogram to your self-check.
So I am freaking out about that right now. They're telling me based on the pathology of it, because now at this point they've done a biopsy, they have cells, and they're like, this is actually a slow-growing cancer. So I'm like, how is that possible? And they're like, you probably have had this for 3 years. And I'm like, how have you missed this for 3 years? And part of the challenge for me is my doctor wanted me to get an MRI when I turned 50, and we had trouble with insurance at the time. And so we just kind of said, okay, we'll just try again next year. Like, we didn't think anything of it. And he was working on it. He got the MRI approved by insurance, and then we had trouble getting it scheduled. So there was a lot of things that sort of happened that prevented me from getting an MRI earlier. If I had, we would have found it and it would have been a different conversation. So that's a little bit of the frustrating part for me, because in sitting down and talking with the surgical oncologist, the doctor that I found who finally talked to me, like really like sat down with me and walked me through all of this. Because obviously you have this question, how do I go from nothing in May in a mammogram and an exam in April, a breast exam in April, to a 5-centimeter tumor in June, at the end of June? And so she explained this particular type of cancer, which is apparently pretty common. So it's called invasive lobular carcinoma. It starts in the lobules of the breast. It's not in the ducts, which is the other one that's very common. And most people think about the ductal cancer because it tends to be a little more aggressive. And you also tend to find it earlier because of where it is.
So they'd be able to see it in a mammogram, right? Something
usually the reason the ductal cancer tends to characterize on a mammogram, I think, is because it calcifies. There's calcium in it, and so it shows up on a mammogram. Lobular cancer doesn't.
Crazy.
Lobular cancer starts in the lobules, and the lobules are way back in the breast, right? So
I didn't know. I didn't know I had lobules.
So I didn't either until I had this conveation, right? I never looked at the biology of a breast. I just was like, oh, I have them. They fed my kids. They worked.
Right.
I never thought about this. Like, it wasn't something I was like, okay, I need to I probably should have. Hindsight being what it is, knowing my family history, probably wouldn't have hurt to know that. But like, who thinks of that? You don't, because you need a doctor to tell you, right? Like, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional. I have no freaking idea. So sat me down and explained this to me. And she talked about, invasive lobular carcinoma, the reason they call it invasive is because there's two different kinds. There's the kind that stays in the lobule, and then there's the kind that breaks out. So invasive is basically just telling you it's broken out and it's moving into other parts of the breast. Ooh. So that's the difference. Now, invasive is never good. You don't like invasive. You want it to stay, but lobular.
I'm thinking in is centralized. It's in, but it's complete antithesis of the whole idea of that. Like, I was like, oh yeah, it's centralized. So that's great. That's why she said if you were to have any kind of cancer, this is the best. But no, it was invasive lobular. Got it. I'm understanding. Thank you for educating me. Okay.
It invades other tissue. So it starts and invades other tissue. So that's the invasive piece, right? So versus in situ, which is stays in one place.
In situ. Got it.
So ductal cancer a lot of times tends to stay in situ, right? It tends to stay in the duct, and then they find it and they can remove it, and and you're good. But ductal cancer can also be super invasive, so you have to be careful. Lobular cancer, it's hard to see because it's so deep in the breast, and it doesn't behave like normal cancer. So most cancers are very ordered, right? It's this, think of it like a Xerox machine that's making bad copies, right? So what cancer is a bad copy of a cell. And then it just keeps copying bad copies, right? And most cancer is very ordered in that respect. And it's like bad cell, bad cell, bad cell, bad cell, bad cell. And then they just keep layering bad cells on top of bad cells until you get like a tumor of bad cells, right? And those tend to be pretty easy to see. Lobular does bad cell, 3 good cells, 1 bad cell, 5 good cells, 3 bad cells. So it's this kind of, it's like the equivalent of taking salt and going like that and like throwing it. So
it's like a bipolar cell.
So one of the reasons it's so hard to spot is that it doesn't order the way that normal cancer orders. So it kind of does this weird, like, tenderly thing through the tissue. So and what happens is, how she explained it to me was, eventually you get to a place where enough cells are formed that then it kind of localizes, and then you get all of a sudden this tumor. And that's how you go from seeing nothing in May to having a 5-centimeter tumor in July, basically the beginning of July. Because by the time I was diagnosed, it was the end of July. So I found it like June 30th, July 1st, and then I was diagnosed July 29th. So
gosh.
Then I had to figure out what's my next step, right? So they're telling me 5-centimeter tumor, you're getting radiation no matter what. Because I was thinking, well, if I do the mastectomy, then I don't have to have radiation, right? And they're like, nope, sorry, tumor's too big. You're going to have radiation regardless. So I'm like, well, fuck. Well, if that's the case, why would I do a mastectomy? We salvage any of the breast. Like, is it viable to do that? So then they did so ultimately what I decided to do was a lumpectomy, but it was really a partial mastectomy because this tumor was so big and my breasts aren't that big. So it was kind of like I lost half my breast essentially. So they did a partial mastectomy and a reconstruction all in the same surgery. So they took tissue from under my shoulder blade in the back and kind of moved it around and rebuilt the breast.
Amazing.
And it looked great. I was amazed. I'm like, this is awesome. But then they did the pathology on the tumor and two things. They found one, I don't need chemo because it's not a type of cancer that'll respond well to chemo. So I was super grateful for that. But then the second thing was we didn't get it all. So I
did that too.
I was like, fuck. So I had to go back in and have a second surgery. And when
how long after the first surgery was the second?
A couple of weeks within like.
Oh my gosh. So they had to get back in there. It hasn't even fully healed. Got it. Oh my goodness.
But they do that on purpose because they want to go in before it heals because they're going in through the same incisions.
Got it.
What they discovered when they went in was that the reconstruction they had done didn't take. There wasn't enough blood flow in the chest to support the new tissue. So the tissue had started to die. So they had to remove like 60% of the reconstructed tissue along with the rest of the tumor. So they hoped. So then that pathology came back. So now I have like a mangled breast because they had to take out part of the reconstruction. So that pathology came back. We think we got it all, but we're not sure. So I was like, so then I go see the radiation oncologist and she looks at me and she goes, so here's the thing. She's like, there are some doctors that would tell you need radiation. She's like, I don't want to radiate you. She's like, lobular doesn't respond well to radiation. It's 12 weeks of radiation. That's a lot of radiation. And she goes, I'm not confident based on this pathology that they've gotten all the cancer out. So why don't you go back, have the mastectomy, remove the rest of the breast tissue. We don't have to radiate if you do that. And then move forward. So I was like, all right. So then I decided, so 2 surgeries in, now I'm like, all right, I'm going for a 3rd surgery. We're going to just remove the rest of the breast tissue and we're going to go that route. And again, all things being what they are, it was the right decision to make because when they did the mastectomy and they did the pathology on the remaining tissue, I had cancer within a millimeter of my chest wall.
Oh, whoa. 1 millimeter?
1 millimeter.
I know how small that is. It's like paper thin. Oh my goodness.
So had I waited any longer or had I not done the mastectomy, it would have metastasized. So I dodged a bullet. I got really lucky. And it's interesting because I look back I was so disappointed when the first reconstruction didn't work. And I was so upset and I felt like it was my fault. I had done something wrong. Like because I don't necessarily always follow all the doctor's directions about like recovery and stuff. Cause I'm,
a goer, a doer. Yes, you are.
So I was like, shit, this is my fault. I screwed this up. But when you take it out to what happened later, there's a reason that happened. Because if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have done the other surgery.
Exactly.
I wouldn't have had to. Right?
Sometimes like the detours are meant to happen, right? It leads you to where you need to be more than you think it's like an obstacle. It's not an obstacle.
Yeah. So that was a huge, I am one of the lucky ones. I really am because I know a lot of women who've had metastasis. I've lost a lot of women in my life. And I get to say that I am cancer free and I don't have to do chemo and I don't have to do radiation. So I had my last surgery in July. I had the reconstruction surgery in July. That was an ass kicking in and of itself because I opted to do a autologous tissue reconstruction. So they take your belly tissue and they remake the breast.
Wow.
So it's a pretty intensive surgery, and it's been a long recovery, and I had some complications that developed about 7 weeks out from her surgery. So it's been a little bit slow for me, but in the long run, I think it'll be the best choice, because it's like low maintenance, and I'm all about low maintenance.
Me too, girl. Yes. I'm tied to that.
And it's kind of like, if I gain weight, Russ will gain weight. If I lose weight, Russ will lose weight. It's like when it's more natural from my perspective, and I don't have to do tune-ups like every 5 to 7 years, right? Or get like stuff fixed. Like I'm like, okay, good. I like that. Low maintenance, big on low maintenance. So
me too. I feel you so much. That's why I have fake small little boobies. I went full A cup. People are like, why did you do that? Because I still want to look like myself. I like low maintenance too. And if I want the biggest look, I will put on my Victoria's Secret push-up bra. But I'm not trying to have that look all the time. Okay. Let's be real. So I feel you. I feel you in a funny way. But I can imagine having gone through what you went through. And, when I got that text message from you, I remember walking to the beach, and I was with my children, and it was after school, or no, it wasn't after school. It was during the summer. So, we spend almost every day at the beach. So there I am walking to the beach, and I get this, like, I think it was like a 22, 26 pointer text from you. And I remember the first one being, I didn't know what other way to begin or how to communicate what I'm going through.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't say anything in the very beginning to a lot of people, including my children, because I didn't want to panic anybody. So the first couple of weeks of that sort of not really knowing what was going on, I didn't say anything to anybody, because I'm like, I'm not going to tell anybody until I know what I'm dealing with. Like, in hindsight, that probably wasn't smart, because I probably could have used a little bit of emotional support in the upfront part. But at the time, it seemed like the right decision, So, and honestly, like, without you guys, this is where the whole concept of who you surround yourself with becomes so incredibly clear, because I could not have done what I mean, come on, 4 surgeries later, I could not have done what I have done in the last year without my tribe, without who were there every step of the way. And frankly, I had to do the last half of it in the middle of a global pandemic, which is
crazy,
ridiculous. Like, so things that I had counted on before, just the sheer physical presence of people, couldn't happen in March and July. So I had 2 surgeries back to back, March and July, that I couldn't have anybody there to support me, except for my kids. But that didn't mean there wasn't support. Let me tell you. Because people like you were like, what can I get you to eat? How can I, like, let me drop off some flowers. Do you need wine? Like, what?
Do you need wine? We got you. We got you. We'll line them up. Whatever you need. Yeah, and I only put out that. I'm sorry. I think my chuckle right now just kind of came out at the wrong time, because I didn't want to take away from what you were saying, because it was very serious. But it took me to a time when we had this conversation last week, how you said, my recommendation number 1 is to not have breast cancer, right, during a pandemic. And I was like, you're so funny, and I love you. You're like, that is my biggest advice, is to not go through this crap during a pandemic.
I do not recommend it. I don't recommend it, period, but I definitely don't recommend it in the middle of a global pandemic.
You're so cute. I love you. You're so strong. You are so beautiful. You are so beautiful. Your mind, your soul, your spirit, you just, everything you've been through, like all you constantly teach me. You constantly help me grow. And you just are so giving and so kind and so generous with your love. And I just want you to know how much you mean to me and you mean to this world, and I'm excited because you're going to write a book, aren't you?
I'm writing a book. I am. Yeah.
So I mean, imagine the little things that you guys all took today, the nuggets that you learned, right? Lobular versus ductal, right? Things I didn't know. I knew I had ducts, but I didn't know I had lobs. I'm a woman.
I didn't either.
Right. And so all those little things and those all these different cells and why it was the way it was, and how it's copied the way it is, and why it's not all the time, and it can be random. Right. And so and self checks, right? Self breast examinations, how important that is, like how important that is. And how you said, I should have done the MRI at 50, right? All
Yeah.
those things, like imagine. So she's going to write this book and it's going to open up so many hearts, eyes, and minds to what you can do to be proactive in this process, and how there is a tribe and there is a community for you, you know, to get help. And like you said, don't settle. I love that. I love that. Don't settle in your doctors. Don't settle in your relationships. Don't settle in your friendships. Don't settle in your business partnerships. Don't settle in your financial advisor. Just don't settle. Right. And that's not to say like I'm better than any other financial. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. There are so many that have been doing what they do for so long, right? So long. I can't take away from the fact that they're veterans. But, you know, like you said last week when we were talking, some of them are so old school, right?
Yeah.
Some of them are so old school. It's 2020, right? And there are things that, you know, we can do together, even with another advisor, with another life agent, right? With CPAs, where we can collaborate. How about that? How about if we all brought our strengths together to really just serve someone better, right? Where we can enhance the situation for people, right? And so, again, I thank you so much for being ready for me more than I was ready for myself when I called you. Oh my gosh. And really excited because you've decided that you're going to go back to work or not.
I don't know yet.
Okay.
I don't know yet. I don't know what's next for me. Let's put it out there like that. I'm trying to be open to all of the possibilities right now.
You want to go back to your last job though, is what I mean. Like, are you?
There are definitely aspects of it that I would miss.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is kind of a family that we've created there. I mean, it's a very unique company in that, I mean, bear in mind that all the stuff that's been going on, there's a lot of people that have gone into this work at home environment and stuff. And we had been doing that already for like 6 years. So there's a very special culture at the company that I will sincerely miss, but there are aspects of the job itself that I won't. So
what won't you miss? Let's talk about that. Let's have a quick real talk. What won't you miss, Susie?
I think there's some high level stress. There's some, and particularly in the role that I was in, because I had a lot of client facing responsibility, which basically means when somebody's unhappy with something, guess who they call, right? Right. So, and having to sort of investigate and figure out when things go wrong and try to, solve those problems can be challenging, right? There's and again, women, we tend to take that all personally. So like if something goes wrong, it's my fault, right? I'm the head of the team. So it's like, I'm very much the buck stops here kind of person. So there's aspects of that definitely aren't healthy mentally and emotionally. So I either need to get better at dealing with that and not taking it on, or I need to change sort of what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. I guess both, that's probably the same either way, but
I love what you're saying, but that's like, see, again, I love when we get together because we love just opening up perspective and looking at things and dissecting and looking at every angle, right? And trying to figure out what's a better way. It may not be the best way, but what's a better way? And I just love that about you, just how open-minded you are to just growth. I think that's why we get along so well too, right? But I know that you also mentioned last week that I thought was very real, especially in this time now where we're all dealing with high levels of stress that maybe we've never dealt with before, especially if you're dealing with what you're dealing with, in these times. Like you said, I don't recommend it in these global pandemic times, right? But you did mention also, even in your career history, right?
Yeah.
When you look back, there were times, right? There were times when, your body kind of knew more than you did about when it was time to kind of let go and move on, right? Can you kind of touch on that, like a little bit on that, please?
Yeah. So I think there's something else that women do pretty regularly, which is we dissociate ourselves from what's going on physically, or we separate our emotional from our physical. And women are particularly gifted at that. Like we're really good at processing emotion, but when it's overwhelming or it's scary or whatever, we just have a tendency to completely separate it from what's going on. And I think there's a lot to be said for touching base with yourself physically and not ignoring those things that your body's trying to tell you. Because, and so all my life, I've always been very good at that sort of separation aspect. And I tend to be more intellectual than I am emotional. I tend to, and I was the kid who super high threshold for pain, right? And like, would end up with bruises and cuts and things and have no idea how I got them because I really just wasn't attentive to what was happening physically, right? Like,
wow, that's so interesting.
So going through some periods of time, like, with career history and companies and things like that, I have had a couple of experiences over the course of, the years where emotionally, mentally, I knew, like, I was in a job, one particular situation, I was in a job for far too long. And I had sort of reached the level that I was going to reach and I wasn't going anywhere. And I could literally do it with one arm tied behind my back. And like, I was sleepwalking through most of the day, which is not conducive to my sort of emotional health or growth, but it's easy. And it was comfortable. And so I stayed because it was comfortable and familiar. And I had kids and it was close to home. And it was like, I had a lot of excuses or reasons to stay. And then I ended up having a massive health crisis that made me rethink all of that. And this is going back to like 2003. I had it was before my son was born. I had a ectopic pregnancy and a miscarriage, but it's the kind that could kill you. Like, and like literally I'm in the hospital and they're like, you can't leave because you could die. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, what are you talking about? Right. And I was bleeding internally and didn't know it because, again, threshold for pain, right? I had been walking around for a week in pain, but didn't think that much of it. So what's become really important for me is to check in physically, like, and especially to recognize when something's happening, like that's emotional, to check in with the physical, like what's going on with that. And it's interesting because I'm doing, after having 4 surgeries, I'm doing physical therapy to loosen up the shoulder and stuff. And she's was talking about how I need to check in with all the muscles, right? Like, because I just excited of like what's happening, right? And 4 surgeries later, there's areas where you just can't feel stuff and everything. Like, it's just what it is. But it's so important to take a moment, take a breath, and just let yourself feel like what's going on, right? Yeah. For me, it's always in the gut. It's always in the, in the sort of stomach area. Like if I have that sort of sinking feeling, something's wrong.
Yeah, but I'm constipated. I'm pretty stressed. That's
yeah. My MO was to ignore that.
Yeah, right? You were just kind of numb to it all the time because you're just going. So, if there's one thing I've learned, it's don't ignore it. So that's kind of become my mantra now. And then it's just like, just breathe, just breathe, like breathe. And I was big on with the kids forever, like stop, breathe, and think, right? Stop, breathe, think. But I wasn't practicing what I was preaching. So here I am telling the kids in like emotional situations or when there's stress or when there's upheaval or whatever, these are the 3 things you need to do. Guess who wasn't doing that? Isn't it crazy?
Me, right? So like you have to walk the walk. You have to.
Yes.
Right? And like self-care for women is kind of a foreign thing. We tend to, especially when you're a mom, you tend to put your self-care on the very back burner. And I'm here to tell you, you can't. You can't. Because you will be no good to your children or the people in your life if you don't take care of yourself. And I'm a perfect example of that because if I had waited any longer on this cancer, I would be in a whole different situation. I would be in a very different, and I would be having conversations that I'm not ready to have with my kids. I'm just not. So self-care is critical. And that starts with checking in with what's going on, right?
Yeah.
From head to toe, literally, like feel it, like if your knees hurt, why do my knees hurt? Like if you're, why does my back hurt?
Mm-hmm.
Why does my jaw hurt? Right? Because I tend to carry all my tension like up in here, right? And I clench my teeth.
Me too, girl, me too.
I will, and when I'm super stressed or super angry or super frustrated, and so it's like, why does my jaw hurt? Right? Like, so you have to ask yourself those questions and kind of get to what's going on, because there's always an emotional cause, always.
You're right.
Oh
my gosh.
And I'm a big believer. I think, like genetics aside, that's definitely a factor. I think diet is a factor, but I think stress is a huge factor in all of this sort of disease and illness that we see around us. I just know it is. So
I cannot agree with you more. That's why I've been trying to kind of preach. I know I'm getting a lot of pushback for what I've been saying, but stress is the biggest pandemic of all, and it's been for a long time, and it causes all these diseases, right? It causes so many ailments. It causes suicide. It causes freaking violence, right? Domestic violence, even all these things. And it's so important, like you said, to just, what was it? You said, sit, breathe, think. Was that what it was?
Stop,
Stop.
Breathe, think.
I love that. Stop, breathe, think. I love that so much. And asking your body parts, why do you feel this way?
Yeah.
Why does my shoulder hurt, right? Why is my back hurt? Why is my hip flexor out? Like, what's going on?
We have a tendency, people, like humans are kind of wired to reach a state of overwhelm, in terms of stressors and stuff. And the thing is, like, back in the day, like you were probably being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. So there was a reason to feel the way you felt. Now you're in this situation where the stress is real, but it's not life-threatening per se, but your body still responds as if it is. So
true.
One of the things you have to really think about is, like, in certain stressful situations, we tend to get overwhelmed because it just seems too much to deal with, right? That's not helping the stress response in your body. So you have to kind of cut it down into smaller pieces that you can deal with, because progress helps stop that stress response. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, like, and this is all what I have learned just through practice, right? But it's like, sometimes you have a problem and it's like, you have to stop, breathe, and then ask yourself, and this is the thinking part, can I solve this right now? And if you can't, then it makes more sense to put it aside or take the small piece of it you can address in that moment, deal with that, and then put the rest aside until you can deal with, and slice it into like smaller slices that you can deal with in a reasonable fashion. Because if you try to take it all on at once, you just get into this spiral of like anxiety that's not helpful. Trust me, I know, I've done it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love what you're saying. You're just like a wealth of knowledge, and it's so good. I've been taking notes like crazy. You know me, I'm like the lifelong learner here. I'm like, I just love everything you had to say and share, and it's just so, you're again such a blessing. You give the world hope. You give everyone faith that they can get through whatever they can get through. And I started working on this course, and it's called the Real MIT. And it's mamas in transformation or transition. I don't know. I'm going to do a survey to figure out what's best. But I would love for you to co-lead that with me, because I know from what we've both been through personally, and even as a unit and as a tribe, there's so much to be shared. There's so much to be learned. There's so much for women to take away from and to just regain their confidence, take more control of their lives, take more control of their health, to not feel unfucked, right? To not feel, or to be unfucked and to be unstuck, right? Emotionally, physiologically, right? Yeah. Physically, all those things. And it all matters, because you all matter. You all matter. Okay. Quick thing. I know we only have like 2 minutes left, but I'm going to go over a quick refresher for us. Okay. And it's about the life insurance piece. Like I said, I try to keep this educational, right? And I want to bring awareness to things, but I just want to, again, bring attention to the fact that cash value inside of life insurance, that's basically like the long-term savings vehicle, right? That's built in under the umbrella of life insurance, which makes it tax advantaged, right? It makes it a tax sheltered vehicle. That's what you and I have, right? We have this. I'm proud of it. I love it. I was like, oh my gosh, everyone needs to know about it. Whether it's with me or with someone else, get protected. You know, we are not promised tomorrow.
Yeah.
We really aren't. No one gets out of here. I've said this alive, right? Let's just be real. Let's face it. Okay, let's face it. But what can we do today to give us more financial peace of mind, give us more emotional peace of mind, even for ourselves, for our family? Now, how about if it's not just about the death benefit, right? Because that's one part of it. And that's what I'm writing here as the DB, the death benefit, which is good. But it's not all about that. It's also about the living benefit, right? Living benefit, which is the cash value. So you can build wealth under the umbrella of life insurance,
right?
But you could build up this cash value too. Okay. And what's so cool about the cash value is that it grows tax-free. You can access it tax-free. You can use it for whatever you want. So that could be college funding for your kids, a vacation, right? A baby.
And you can use it for like a health crisis, right? Like if you need to borrow against it for medical, you know, I mean, hopefully you have good medical insurance, but I know for a fact I have great insurance and I'm still out of pocket over $12,000, well over $12,000 on this whole experience. So imagine somebody who doesn't have really good insurance. I mean,
exactly,
it's what it costs. So, I mean, that there's benefits there too, because you can use that for medical, unexpected medical expenses.
So flexible. Exactly. And then another thing that we added to this piece was the long-term care, which is awesome. So we have that. And what that does is it gives you access to your death benefit while you're alive too. So just know, right, that you can access your death benefit while you're alive if you need to. And for your policy, it's like $5,000 a month that you could dip into if you wanted to, of the death benefit.
Right.
Of the death benefit.
Right.
How powerful is that? You know, 70% of women 65 and older are going to need long-term care. I love what we do because we also incorporate this part of the plan in someone's financial plan, you know, and the most inexpensive way of getting long-term care insurance is adding it to your life insurance. But again, right, the whole biggest piece is time is of the essence, right? Yeah. Time is of the essence. And I'm so glad that we got this for you and that you're protected, your family's protected, but you've got all these living benefits too. And that I have it. And for that reason, I just feel more free and secure, right? But more than that is just having the security of a tribe.
Yeah.
And you to help me in all the ways I need. And hopefully, you know that I'm here for you in any way you need to. And I'm excited for our future together. I'm excited to have you back on to share your, to share your book and your progress. But I love you. Christelle is going to have her show next. So you guys hop on to hers. It's on the Speak Up and Empower. It's beautiful, beautiful time as well. All about lifting women, people all together, all about heart-centered people. So Susie, I love you. Thank you for making the time. I love you so much.
All right. Take care.
Bye guys. Have a great Wednesday.